Well, good morning, everyone. I'm Dee Dee Petri, the 24th Regent of the Mount Vernon Ladies Association, and it is my honor on behalf of all of us at Mount Vernon to welcome you here today and to thank you so much for your service. 2025 is a very important year. We here at Mount Vernon are celebrating the 250th anniversary of the appointment of George Washington as Commander-in-Chief of the Continental Army, as well as the birth of the Armed Forces. On our website, we keep track of what George Washington was doing 250 years ago, and I urge you to follow it as well. We may think we have it tough, but let me share with you Washington's correspondence of August 4, 1775. On that day, he writes to the governor of Rhode Island, because the army is nearly out of gunpowder. I am now, sir, he writes, in strict confidence, to acquaint you that our necessities in powder and lead are so great as to require an immediate supply. I must earnestly entreat every pound which can possibly be spared. The case does not admit delay. Given the situation, one can only chuckle at the general orders that Washington issued that same day. It is with indignation and shame, he writes again, that contrary to all orders, straggling soldiers do still fire at a distance, where there is not the least probability of hurting the enemy, and where no other end is answered but to waste ammunition, expose them to the ridicule of the enemy, and keep their own camps harassed by frequent and continual alarms to the hurt of every good soldier. We know it. To win the fight for independence was by any account virtually impossible. America had no standing army. There was no formal military training. Our soldiers consisted of volunteers with varying skills and commitment. And yet, over the next 8.5 years, Washington made the impossible possible. With nearly superhuman patience, he took command of a diverse array of American soldiers and defeated the most fearsome army on earth. Thanks to that revolutionary generation, today Americans are not subjects, we are all citizens. We are the beneficiaries of an enlightened political system based on civilian rule and consent of the governed, where all of us can enjoy life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. We at Mount Vernon are honored to recognize recipients of the Order of Purple Heart, known as the Badge of Military Merit established by George Washington, to recognize soldiers who made our liberties possible. We are grateful for the hundreds and thousands of brave men and women who have been wounded or given their lives over 2 centuries to affirm the revolutionary principles which undergird this great country. Purple Heart recipients are welcome here free of charge each and every day of the year. We welcome your families, and we invite you to come back often. George Washington's home is your home. The military community has been welcome here for over 160 years, when in 1858, a group of women took over the establishment. A mere 50 years after George Washington's death, Mount Vernon had fallen into disrepair. His relatives could no longer afford to operate Mount Vernon and offered the property for sale, first to the federal government and then to the Commonwealth of Virginia. Both of them said no. And so a group of fearless ladies who named themselves the Mount Vernon Ladies Association of the Union banded together to rescue the home and to raise $200,000, an immense sum at that time, to purchase the estate. We have been responsible for the management and oversight ever since. Even during the tumultuous years of the Civil War, the Ladies Association ensured that both Union and Confederate soldiers could pay tribute to General Washington after laying down their arms. General Winfield Scott issued Order Number 13, declaring the estate's status as nonpartisan. As I conclude, let me give a shout out to the Boeing Corporation, which has been a faithful sponsor of this event for many years. We are delighted to have Mr. James Cutting, Director, Boeing Army Systems Government Operations, with us today. Jim, would you please stand up? It is now my honor to introduce the U.S. Army Chorus for the singing of the national anthem. And didn't they do a fantastic job before? And again, welcome to all of you, and thank you for your service.
Oh, day can you see by the dawn's early light, what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, who brought stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight, o'er the ramparts we watched with so gallantly streaming, and the rockets and those bursting in gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner wave o'er the land? And the whole of the brave.
Good morning. My name is Jeremy Ray. I'm the Senior Director of Interpretation here at Mount Vernon. Actually, before I get into it, I've been here for 18 years, and this is my first time really participating in this, and it has been such a tremendous honor. I see a lot of familiar faces from the ceremony we did last night, and before I get into this, something that Ben said as he was doing the memorial was that Mount Vernon is a current from the past and George Washington to the soldiers and this wonderful badge of merit today. And hopefully I can give a little bit more of that historical context to that. So thank you. Made me a little bit worried for my job last night because you did a really great job. So, all right. So as I said, I'm honored to welcome you to the commemoration of the National Purple Heart Day here at Mount Vernon, which is the home of George Washington, the father of our country. We honor and pay legacy to the Purple Heart with a memorial that's located just outside our front gate. And this year marks the 27th anniversary of the laying of that Purple Heart monument. The marker itself is mile marker 0 of the Purple Heart Trail, which runs through all 50 states. And I think, as Ben said last night, Mount Vernon is a fitting location for such a marker. Mount Vernon was George Washington's beloved home starting in 1754. And at that time, he was a young man fighting on Virginia's frontier as a colonel in a conflict that we know as the French and Indian War. And he served for glory and the security of the British Empire at that time. He retired to a life of domestic felicity, tending to his farms and his family. And for 15 years, young Washington sought to reap the rewards of his service and his sacrifice. But 3,000 miles away from here, in the halls of Parliament, lords and MPs looked to get their financial house in order. Parliament looked west, and the American colonists saw a conspiracy. Those colonists, citizens of Britain, watched their rights and privileges eroded by acts of Parliament. Throughout the 1760s and into the 1770s, those colonists exclaimed loudly the slogans that we know from our history books. No taxation without representation, give me liberty, or give me death. In 1773 in Boston, they threw a little tea party, and Parliament sent troops to enforce their will. George Washington wrote his neighbor in June of 1774, Americans will never be taxed without their own consent, and that the cause of Boston The despotic measures in respect to it, I mean now, is and ever will be considered the cause of America. Washington was not a man for empty words. He was a man of action. On July 4th, 1774, he asked, "Ought we not then to put our virtue and our fortitude to the severest test?" About 1 year later, in June, 250 years from now, George Washington was unanimously selected to be commander-in-chief of a new Continental Army. It was not an army of one. Washington took command of a band of farmers, bakers, booksellers, merchants, millers, and smiths. These were not men of means, not gentry who purchased their way into privilege. Washington inherited common citizens, men who, like Washington himself, were fighting for their rights. Men who were not yet soldiers, but were patriots. The fight for liberty would involve everyone, be them from Virginia, Massachusetts, New York, or any of the other colonies. It would be an American fight. Washington wrote, "The name of American, which belongs to you in your national capacity, must always exalt the just pride of patriotism." It would take pride, courage, and commitment to emerge victorious. General Washington knew that you did not have to be an officer to show courage and commitment. In 1782, he established the badge of military merit to honor soldiers who performed with, quote, "virtuous ambition, unusual gallantry, and extraordinary fidelity." Recipients were awarded a Purple Heart made out of silk or cloth to be worn on their left breast. This Purple Heart award was unique because it was available to all ranks of the Army at the time, when European traditions allowed only for officers to be decorated for merit. Washington stated, "Let us therefore animate and encourage each other to show the whole world that a freeman contending for liberty on his own ground is superior to any mercenary on earth." Washington made his badge in the shape of a heart because true patriotism comes from love of country, love of honor, love of comrades, and the willingness to even lose one's life and the things dear to you in service of that love. The badge of military merit was intended by Washington to be a permanent decoration, but was not used again after the Revolutionary War until it was reestablished as the Purple Heart Medal on February 22nd, 1932, the 200th anniversary of George Washington's birth. It was directed by the Army under the direction of Army Chief of Staff famed General Douglas MacArthur, who received the first Purple Heart Medal. The Purple Heart Medal is awarded to any member of the armed forces of the United States who, while serving under competent authority in any capacity with one of the U.S. Armed Forces, has been wounded, killed, or has died of wounds received from an opposing enemy force while in armed combat or as a result of an act of international terrorism or while serving as part of a peacekeeping force. Which brings me back to Mount Vernon, this sacred place. We've heard that over and over, right? Thanks to the preservation efforts of the Mount Vernon Ladies Association, George Washington's home continues to welcome American citizens and American heroes alike so that they can pay tribute to the sacrifices made for our liberties. Today, we are honored to welcome here an extraordinary group of men and women who share Washington's love of country and commitment to service and who have sacrificed and served with honor. We are lucky today because we are in the company of heroes. I want to recognize and acknowledge those for whom we hold this event, those service members who have been wounded or killed in defense of our nation. As I read from this list, please stand if you are able and remain standing. If you are a family member who is representing their loved one who is a recipient, please also stand, if able, in honor of that person. If you have served in World War II, please stand. The Korean War, please stand. The Vietnam War. Our nation's campaigns in regions such as Dominican Republic, Grenada, and Panama. The First Gulf War. Any peacekeeping operations or from an act of international terrorism. campaigns in Iraq and Afghanistan. We thank you all. We want you to know that this is an honor for us to welcome you here today. It is now my privilege to introduce Angelo Wider, Commander, Chapter 353, Military Order of the Purple Heart. Angelo Wider was born and raised in the Bronx, New York. He enlisted in the U.S. Army in 1964, and he completed his basic training at Fort Dix, New Jersey. After spending time in Hawaii, he deployed to Vietnam with Company C, 1st Battalion, 27th Infantry, 25th Infantry Division, which was known as the Wolfhounds. Wounded in action in 1966, he avoided fatal injury as the bullet passed through his body without puncturing any vital organs. He became the youngest non-commissioned officer in his unit in Vietnam at the age of 19 years and 4 days old. Angelo completed his bachelor's degree from City University of New York and his master's from George Washington University. He attended executive programs while at the U.S. Postal Service, including the Senior Managers in Government program at Harvard University and the Chief Financial Officer program at the University of Maryland. He worked in telecommunications for 10 years and then for the U.S. Postal Service, a career executive service, where as combat veteran and Purple Heart recipient, he served as Master of Ceremonies for the unveiling of the first Purple Heart stamp at Mount Vernon, Virginia. Meeting several patriots, he joined the Military Order of the Purple Heart. Angelo was subsequently recruited out of retirement by the Military Order of the Purple Heart to lead their national service program to help veterans and their families process claims for compensation and benefits with the Department of Veterans Affairs. Angelo also participated in the design and issuance of the Buffalo Soldier stamp. Since retiring from the post office in 2010, Angelo has been involved with several community projects. He currently serves as commander of the Military Order of the Purple Heart, Chapter 353 here in Virginia, and serves as the legislative director for the National Military Order of the Purple Heart. Angelo resides in Loudoun County, Virginia, with his lovely wife, Camille. Please welcome Angelo Wider.
Well, thank you, Jeremy. I get ready to say, who's that guy? Well, first, before I get into the script here, we do enough of these, and it's hard to get emotional. But I got emotional when they were up here singing those songs in the outreach. So, hey, let's give them another round of applause. Good morning and welcome. On behalf of the Military Order of the Purple Heart, greetings and salutations. I am Angelo Wider, MOPH Chapter 353 Commander and the Legislative Director for our national organization. We are once again delighted for this Purple Heart weekend to be here with George Washington here in Mount Vernon. This is a tradition that we have come to love, enjoy, and appreciate. Up front, I would like to acknowledge and commend the Mount Vernon leadership and the staff for the wonderful work that they do. They're a wonderful collaborator and a great partner. They have stepped up and stepped in. George Washington would be proud. So personally, I say thank you. I also want to recognize and thank our major sponsor, Boeing, Tim, and we've already recognized him for their concerted effort and support. Jim is representing Boeing today. Thank you, Jim, and take our appreciation back. The Washington Commanders have also stepped up, even though they had a rough night last night. We appreciate their participation and support as they get ready for the football season. So, hey, let's go Commanders. Chris, are you here? Chris joined us last night representing the Commanders, and we were glad to have them there. And we will be cheering them on. So go, go, go. All right. We have representation here from MOPA's national region and our State Department rep, Ben, who was here last night and made the presentation at the Reef Lane. I'm especially proud of representation from other MOPH chapters, representatives who are here. Thank you, thank you, thank you. We have a unique bond, and I really appreciate it, especially those that have traveled the distance to be here to share this unique event with us. I would be remiss if I did not acknowledge and express appreciation to Gold Star families, the parents, spouses, and children of those who made the ultimate sacrifice. Thank you for their service, and we honor the service and the commitment that they made, the ultimate sacrifice. Thank you, thank you, thank you. The Purple Heart and its predecessor, the Badge of Merit, as you just heard, are more than a medal. They are symbols of sacrifice, resilience, and the enduring spirit of those who fought for and protected this 250-year-old experiment in democracy. I appreciate when someone says, "Thank you for your service." We must continue to work to ensure that the sacrifices of our brothers and sisters are not forgotten, and their legacy will be an inspiration for future generations. I encourage all within the sound of my voice to commit to and renew the dedication to supporting wounded veterans, advocating for veteran rights, and fostering a sense of community. Thank you, George Washington. Thank you, veterans. Thank you all for being here as part of this recognition of the Purple Heart and honoring the recipients. Now, without further ado, it is my pleasure and honor to introduce a true leader, a true patriot, our first president, our first real commander-in-chief, our gracious host, the Honorable George Washington. Come on, George.
Gentlemen, ladies, neighbors, and honored guests, thank you for your attendance this day. We are pleased to have you here at Mount Vernon. Mrs. Washington and myself are happy to have you visit our home. Mount Vernon is far away from the battlefield on which our liberties were secured by the sacrifices of our soldiers. Hard-fought freedoms dearly won, and now enjoyed by the citizens of this generous nation. Although all citizens have had to sacrifice at crucial times in our history, those who choose to take up arms in defense of their country face the greatest sacrifices of all. To them is owed a debt that can never be repaid. I have not time to tell you all the hardships and calamities that faced the Continental Army and how they endured with patient suffering through all. I'm sure many of these stories are known to you. Starvation was our constant companion from the very outset of hostilities. During the depths of winter, there were times when the men would boil leather to make soup, or eat the bark of trees simply to still the rumbling of their stomachs. Yet they endured. Although we attempted to procure uniforms and clothes for the men, there were times when they went into the field dressed in little more than rags, some even bereft of shoes. Indeed, on the road to Valley Forge, one could mark our progress by the bloody footprints in the snow. Yet they endured. In a final indignity, although the men were supposed to be paid monthly, the Congress was often short on funds. There are times when the men would go a year without being paid. Yet they endured. These are the men who fought for the freedoms that you now enjoy. These are the men whose endurance in the face of suffering made them heroes. In war, soldiers fight, and generals are crowned with laurels. Too often, we honor those who lead instead of those who serve. During the course of our war for independence, the Congress awarded medals for significant events, and in almost every instance, the recipients were high-ranking officers. After all, this was the practice in the armies of Europe. We were not a European army. We were an army of free men fighting for liberty. I realized that the road to glory in a patriot army and a free country must be open to all. So in 1782, I designated 3 badges to honor the contributions of the common soldier. The first two of these badges were honorary badges of distinction. The first of these was to be given to all non-commissioned officers and soldiers who had served for more than 3 years. The badge itself was a narrow strip of cloth set into an angular form known as a chevron, to be worn on the left sleeve of the uniform coat. The second badge were for those who had served for more than 6 years, were to be adorned by 2 strips of cloth set parallel to one another of a similar form. For an army that began its existence with 1 year term of enlistments, I thought it was important to celebrate the men who had the distinction of serving for an extended period. The third badge, the one that we are here to honor today, was the badge of military merit. I was desirous to cherish the valorous ambition in my soldiers, as well as to foster and encourage every species of military merit. Therefore, I directed that any time a singular meritorious action be performed, the author of it be permitted to wear upon the facing of his left breast the image or figure of a heart in purple cloth or silk, edged with narrow lace or binding. This was to be awarded not only for unusual gallantry, but also for extraordinary fidelity and essential service of any kind to the army. Those men so certified would be enrolled in a book of merit so that their names might never be forgotten in the annals of this great nation. Those who achieved this final distinction were suffered to pass all guards and sentinels which officers were permitted to do. The men of the Continental Army faced hardship and suffering, yet they endured. And more than that, they persevered and they won. Not the generals, not me, the men. Although all soldiers are expected to be brave and exemplary of conduct, there are a handful that go beyond what might be reasonably expected of a soldier. It is for them that the badge of military merit was created. I wrote in the order establishing the badge that it was to be a permanent one. I know not how many may go on to earn this distinction in the future generations of our nation, but I know that each of them deserves the favorable notice that a brave and faithful soldier deserves from his country. Thank you.
Thank you to General Washington. So it actually was General Washington when he was serving as a colonel during the French and Indian War, the Virginia Regiment, who said that he would make it the most agreeable part of his duty to study merit and reward the brave and deserving. So our next speaker most certainly would not have escaped General Washington's notice. Vice Chief of Staff of the Army, General James Mingus. General Mingus enlisted in the Iowa National Guard on 28 December 1981, and in 1985 he was commissioned through ROTC from Winona State University as a second lieutenant of field artillery and was later assessed on to active duty in 1987 as an infantryman. In March 1988, he was posted as the platoon leader in 2nd Battalion, 20th Infantry, 3rd Infantry Division in Germany. Over the course of 4 years, he also served as a company executive officer and battalion maintenance officer. After the infantry officer's advanced course, he posted to the 82nd Airborne Division, where he commanded B Company, 2nd Battalion, 505th Parachute Infantry, the division's long-range surveillance detachment, and was aide-de-camp to the division's commanding general. General Mingus remained at Fort Bragg, taking command of the, I'm not good with Roman numerals, give me a second, 18th Airborne Corps, there we go, Long-Range Surveillance Company. In August I was a history guy, so I should probably be better at it. In August 1997, he returned to ROTC to become an assistant professor of military science at the University of Tennessee, Knoxville. In 2000, he was posted to the 1st Battalion, 75th Ranger Regiment, Hunter Army Airfield, Georgia, where he served as a liaison officer and operations officer. In January 2003, General Mingus returned to Fort Bragg, becoming the chief of the Joint Planning Group and then Chief of Current Operations with Joint Special Operations Command. In 2005, General Mingus moved to Fort Benning, Georgia, where he commanded the 4th Ranger Training Battalion of the Ranger Training Brigade and the Regimental Special Troops in the 75th Ranger Regiment. General Mingus then reported in August 2009 to the Army War College at Carlisle Barracks, Pennsylvania. In 2010, General Mingus took command of the 4th Brigade Combat Team, 4th Infantry Division at Fort Carson, Colorado. In March 2013, General Mingus reported to U.S. Central Command, MacDill Air Force Base, Florida, where he served as Chief of the Commander's Action Group and Deputy J5 Special Plans Working Group. In September, I told you he would not have escaped the General's notice, right? In September 2015, General Mingus returned to Fort Carson and the 4th Infantry Division to serve as the division's Deputy Commanding General Maneuver. He then became director of the Mission Command Center of Excellence at the U.S. Army Combined Arms Center at Fort Leavenworth. 2 years later, General Mingus took command of the 82nd Airborne Division at Fort Bragg. Following this assignment, General Mingus reported to the Joint Staff at the Pentagon in September 2020, serving both as the J3 Director for Operations and the Director of the Joint Staff. Ladies and gentlemen, General James Mingus.
Well, good morning again, everybody. I'm a little bit biased, but I thought the Army Chorus was pretty awesome. Jeremy, thanks. Appreciate it. I didn't read the whole thing there. But if you notice in there, I avoided the Pentagon for many, many years, and now it seems like I can't get away. We've been there. I think this will be, when it's all said and done, our longest assignment. Thanks to you for keeping this just an amazing and hallowed grounds and everything that you do. It is an honor to be here today, and it's my privilege to formally recognize the legacy of the Purple Heart and the almost 2 million men and women who have received it. There's no better place to reflect on that tradition than here in the shadow, and as we saw, George Washington's legacy. Before he was the nation's first president, he was a soldier. He commanded a force that was at many points starving, undersupplied, worn down by years of war. Yet Washington still found a way to instill in our military the beginnings of what we now call selfless service. With the war nearing its end in 1782, Washington established the badge of military merit to recognize the extraordinary fidelity and acts of gallantry. He understood that sacrifice without recognition leads to abandonment, and abandonment over time erodes the will to serve. And since then, our military has spent centuries building on that same custom. When the Purple Heart, as we just discussed, was revived in 1932 on the 200th anniversary of Washington's birth, its purpose was recast. It became a symbol for the consequences of war and awarded to those wounded or killed in action. That change is significant because it shifted the center of gravity to acknowledging that wounds matter, that they are not hidden, and that those who sustain them must remain part of our nation's conscience. And that is what makes today recognition absolutely necessary. Society often assumes that military medals are reserved for acts of extraordinary heroism, a single defining moment of glory like something out of a Hollywood movie. But the Purple Heart defies the version of war that most people are comfortable with. The medal is not given for what our culture imagines war to be. It's awarded for what war can actually be: brutal, traumatic, and in many ways painful. No one goes to war wanting a Purple Heart. It's an award because someone absorbed the worst of war can do. And that's not something to romanticize. It's something for our society to understand. The Purple Heart does not discriminate by rank. Throughout our history, it's been awarded to both officers and privates, given to draftees and those who have made a career serving in the military. To those who ran into fire and those who were blindsided by it, it has crossed every generation across multiple campaigns and continents. It's been awarded to soldiers who bled under Grant, Pershing, Eisenhower, MacArthur, Westmoreland, Schwarzkopf, Odierno, and still today, countless other commanders. It has no branch, no unit, no politics. It doesn't care if you fought in Iraq, Syria, Quezon, or in Panama. What it measures is sacrifice. You will not find it granted for perfect service, and you will not find it awarded to those who evaded risk. It is, in many ways, the most democratic of our military decorations, given to men and women who were caught at the center of wars we send our military to fight. Most Americans won't ever receive a Purple Heart, and many don't know anyone who has, but we do not have to imagine what it looks like. We only have to remember a few local people. First, Private First Class Eli Linden. In 1944, Eli landed on Omaha Beach with Patton's Third Army. In the push through occupied Europe, he was wounded, captured, and held as a prisoner of war. His recovery was slow. Walking again took time, so did learning how to move forward with the weight of what he'd seen and experienced. When he returned home here to Loudoun County, he went back to teaching. For decades, he stood in front of classrooms and spoke not of glory, but what it means to serve faithfully, take responsibility, and to give back when others would not. Then there's First Lieutenant Samuel Mosley from Lynchburg, Virginia. Sam deployed to Korea as a young infantry platoon leader with the 7th Infantry Division, Tropic Lightning. As part of routine mission, his unit was sent to hold a steep and highly exposed stretch of terrain under constant threat from Chinese and North Korean forces. Under heavy light artillery and machine gun fire, Sam led his men forward, repositioned them under fire, and refused to fall back even after being wounded. He stayed in the fight until he could get his men to safety. When he came home to Virginia, he stayed connected to the Army in the way that quiet professionals do. He spent much of his time showing up to community events, ensuring that the stories of what took place in Korea never faded from memory, reminding others that some of the men and women who bore the sacrifice of that war still live beside us today. From Alexandria is Colonel Paris D. Davis. During Vietnam at the time of he was a captain at the time, led a special forces detachment of mostly young and inexperienced men in a 19-hour battle against a larger, more experienced North Vietnamese force. Though wounded multiple times, Davis refused evacuation. At several points, he engaged in close hand-to-hand combat, called in artillery under fire, and dragged his wounded teammates off the battlefield and stayed behind until every last one of them was safe. After leaving the Army, he founded a local newspaper here in Alexandria that ran for 30 years, amplifying local voices, covering civic life, and offering locals a place to see their daily lives reflected in print. There are many ways to measure a career. Davis stands out not for a single act of valor, but for how he fully lived out the obligation to serve others both in and out of uniform. And finally, Staff Sergeant Monica Beltran from down the street here in Woodbridge. In 2005, during a convoy escort mission near the Iraqi border, then 19-year-old Private First Class Monica Beltran was in the turret of a Humvee when insurgents opened fire from multiple directions. Her convoy was pinned down in a hasty ambush. Shrapnel split her wrist open, but she stayed at her .50 cal, firing until the last truck from her convoy cleared the kill zone. Her action that day saved many lives, many, many lives. Back home, she had to relearn how to do the simple things like buttoning up a shirt, holding a coffee mug, and turning a key. But as soon as she was able, she asked to come back to duty. She then served another 18 years alongside the soldiers she never once thought about leaving behind. War doesn't end when the uniform comes off. For the wounded and the survivors of the Purple Heart recipients, that's usually where it begins. And what comes next is different for everybody. Some of you here today have worn the Purple Heart for decades. You've made it through the long recovery, the second surgeries, the routine that comes with adapting to a body that doesn't respond the same way. And some of it's just because we're getting older. Many of us are still in that process, but many of you have buried it with a loved one. And several of you have here today received it in a small velvet box that didn't weigh nearly enough. You are all part of this. And we're not here to commemorate your injuries. We're here as a community to recognize the journey and the life that you've built around them. And events like these are absolutely essential. They need to happen in more places and more often. Moments create space for connection and types of important conversations we don't often have. They allow veterans to see each other. They help families to know they're not alone. And they give others who haven't faced these frustrating challenges a chance to understand something they may have to never live through. Now, I want to close by speaking directly to our Purple Heart recipients here. There is no right way to live through what you've had to overcome, but you're not carrying it alone. You and the millions of others not here with us today belong to a legacy that stretches back to the founding of this country and runs through every generation since. A rich legacy of selfless service, resilience, and sacrifice. So on behalf of this grateful nation, thank you. May we never forget what you've endured, and may we always be worthy of the immeasurable sacrifice you've made. Thank you, and God bless.
Thank you, General Mingus. It was a pleasure to have you here with us today. Ladies and gentlemen, recipients of the Purple Heart Medal and your guests, we are honored by your attendance today, especially here at George Washington's Mount Vernon. We strive to share the stories of the sacrifices made by those who have served this country. Mount Vernon and the Military Order of the Purple Heart value educating our fellow citizens regarding the Purple Heart Medal and how and why it is awarded, as well as to honor the men who initiated the war, the man who initiated the award, George Washington. And what a fitting place to commemorate the award and honor its recipients here at Washington's beloved home. I want all to know that the Military Order of the Purple Heart is the only congressionally chartered veterans organization exclusively for combat wounded veterans. Any Purple Heart recipient may join the order. If you are not a member, please ask any one of those in attendance today from the Military Order of the Purple Heart on how they can become a member. We now invite all Purple Heart recipients and their families to join us at the Mount Vernon Inn for a reception beginning at 12 o'clock. Thank you again for coming, and at this time, please rise for the playing of taps to complete today's program.